naturally possessed a certain joyful cheerfulness, and so, as a boy, would very often refresh my father with words to distract him from his weighty concerns. But my careful training, the massive obligations I have, my daily concerns and duties, have obviously dulled this cheerfulness so much that even when it is proper that I should indulge in something lighthearted, I seem to myself to be acting in an inappropriately childish way. I had a truly remarkable desire for distinction. My spirit was quite prone to anger, my judgments quite censorious in proportion to my years. My mother sometimes grew impatient and playfully reproached me with this, alleging that I wanted to be another wise Socrates. I was also very bashful, and this has so burdened me to this very day that altogether I can more rightly be considered a simpleton than a sophisticated city dweller. For in matters both public and private, even in those areas where intimates typically conduct themselves in the greatest familiarity, that bashfulness of mine is equally annoying to myself and others, and that not infrequently prevents me from fulfilling those very obligations which the same modesty usually arouses one to fulfill. I was so overcome by this excessive reticence as a boy that I could never feel entirely at ease even with my own mother, but rather I always interacted with her with a certain reserved respect. Mother found this hurtful, and afterward she quite often had wished in vain to treat it with the ready examples of my brothers and sisters. At last she was brought to the point that she believed for some time that I did not love her, until later at my wedding, which was in the years 1567, she realized that this was simply part of my nature, and both excused and faulted that weakness of mine. Of this I was ashamed as anyone else. What should I say, except that bashfulness of mine was almost rude, and it rendered me so entirely handicapped that I could barely discuss everyday affairs with my wife, without a sense of shame, could scarcely give orders to the household staff. Of the several consequences of this shyness that began in boyhood, one was that I was always distrustful of myself and was eager to hear the deeds of others, to mark their conversations, and to take careful notice for my own use. I benefited more from listening to others than I contributed to them in my speech. When my opinion was settled, I was slow to share it unless some rash irritation of the mind caught me off guard. In short, although I longed for distinction, still I always willingly yielded to others the first rank in conversation or any other activity. I would prefer that others judge to what extent this condition helped me towards learning, though I have now clumsily suggested that prospect. I speak, however, more openly about this weakness of mine for this reason, that youth might draw a lesson of meekness and humility from my example, that they might pursue the sure fruits of knowledge with sure judgment. For I testify that nothing has so equipped me for every circumstance, according to God's blessing, than that strong sense of self-distrust arising from a knowledge of my weakness and bashfulness, and a zealous observation of those others with whom I spent my time. Indeed, all these considerations were goading my heart quite successfully towards the study of humanities, as I loved the noble leisure and peace that my father was holding before me. But the unbelievable harshness of certain teachers, and their excessive brutality, I will spare their names, was almost dragging me in the opposite direction and dissuading me from the study I had begun. For quite often, on one and the same day, the situation was breaking my heart and lessening my love for literature. These outrages so broke my brother's spirit that on one occasion he was nearly out of his mind with excessive misery. Later he would abandon his studies altogether. At length I began to realize just how much I still lacked in the knowledge of the more refined arts, language, and especially history. These subjects I understood were relevant both for a true understanding of the law and for other studies as well. Since I enjoyed a large supply of books there, I vigorously devoted myself without hindrance to those different studies for which my mind was burning. There, while I was directing my insatiable mind to all different kinds of reading, an excellent and very timely thing happened. I'm using here the expression of a young man. A scholar who had noticed my talent asked me about the whole plan of my education. He said that he had seen how many and varied readings I was attempting without a set method or goal. He also said that he was experienced with this bad habit, and that he could be my guide, so that I would not develop it myself, that surely my studies would not be aided by this approach, but rather completely confused, and my natural gifts ruined. He advised instead that I should be careful to set before my gaze some definite objective for my studies, toward which always and unwaveringly I should look, since neither length of life nor the human mind is equal to all areas of knowledge at the same time, I should rather pursue different studies and books of diverse opinion in such a way that they would help me as I headed toward my goal. In truth, I have found this warning very useful in all of my life. I did not restrain myself for long from spewing out some discourse from the most putrid dregs of that atheism as a show of empty knowledge. Hear truly, O good God, by what grace, by what influence my father checked my heedless speech, not by threatening or browbeating me, or by debating the issue, but in a manner pious, holy, learned, and gentle he taught me restraint in those matters which I had not yet satisfactorily understood or examined. He explained that the judgments of learned men should be heeded before rashly displaying one's ignorance. Father so deeply affected me that from that time forward I almost always made it a rule to suspend judgment in all my conversations and judgments until I had understood the subject deeply. As a very wise man, in fact, he understood that true piety cannot be forcibly introduced but must be gently instilled in minds. It cannot be compelled but must be insinuated, not commanded but taught. Coercion is not desired, but persuasion. Here, then, I opened that New Testament which was divinely offered. As I did that, the book displayed to me at first glance that very majestic chapter of the evangelist and apostle John. Quote, "In the beginning was the Word," etc. I read part of the chapter and was so moved as I read that immediately I perceived that the divinity of the argument and the grandeur and authority of the writing surpassed by a great margin all streams of human eloquence. My body shuddered, my mind was dumbfounded, and throughout the whole day I was so overwhelmed that I seemed to myself unsure who I even was.